So, hello there. Welcome back to yet another Night of the Movies podcast. And in these podcasts, I talk all things movies and TV and whatever I want, whenever I want. And in today's podcast, and I'm very, very excited about this, in today's podcast, I'm reviewing Peter Jackson's King Kong, which released in 2005. And I'm also asking the question whether King Kong is actually a Christmas film. But just before I do that, I should say what's at the start of every podcast I do, which is, if you are watching this podcast on YouTube, hello to my viewers, but if you prefer to listen to your podcast on Spotify, well, you can look, as you can also listen to this podcast on Spotify at Night of the Movies on that platform. And if you are already listening to this podcast on Spotify, hello there to podcast listeners, then you can also check this podcast out visually on my YouTube channel at Night of the Movies on that platform as well. Yes, you can watch this podcast on YouTube. Likewise, whatever you may be watching or listening to this podcast, don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the podcast, of course, and please leave me with some feedback on things to improve on in future podcasts, because there are always things to improve on, and feedback is, as ever, much appreciated. So, let's get into it, shall we? King Kong. Peter Jackson's King Kong, which released in 2005 and stars the likes of Jack Black, Adrien Brody, Naomi Watts, Colin Hanks, Kyle Chandler, Jamie Bell, and Andy Serkis in two roles. And if anyone knows what Andy Serkis' second role is in this film, and I will get into it a bit later in this podcast, but if anyone knows what Andy Serkis' second role is, what his second role was in this film, should I say, then I'll be very pleased with you if you already know before I say. But anyway, this film is directed by Peter Jackson, as I've already mentioned twice. It is his King Kong film. And if you don't know who Peter Jackson is, he previously directed the likes of Heavenly Creatures, which I must admit I haven't seen. I really need to get around to watching that. He also directed The Frighteners with Michael J. Fox, which is a very fun comedy horror film. And he's probably most well known now for directing the Lord of the Rings trilogy, which some people consider to be the best trilogy of all time. I also do. I mean, I love the original Star Wars trilogy, but I think that the Lord of the Rings trilogy might be the single best movie trilogy of all time. Alongside that, Peter Jackson directed the Hobbit trilogy, which I know some people weren't as big on and some people really didn't like. Personally, I love the Hobbit trilogy to pieces. And most recently, Peter Jackson directed the Beatles Get Back docuseries, which is very different than his previous films and his previous work. But at the same time, it's also very similar. There's something Peter Jackson has in all of those films where he gives you everything you want from it. Or in the case of the Beatles Get Back docuseries, he shows you what you want to see in the series. You want to see the Beatles making the music, and even so, that docuseries is like 6 hours long. It's a long, long docuseries, even though it's only got 3 episodes. You know, yes, it's that long, but it shows you everything you want to see in the docuseries. He shows you the Beatles coming up with the songs for the Let It Be album, and then it shows you the rooftop recording, and it's just perfect. I love that docuseries, especially because I'm a big Beatles fan. So you get the point. I'm a fan of Peter Jackson. I love the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I love the Hobbit trilogy. I get why some people don't, but I love it to pieces. And I love the Beatles Get Back docuseries, and I also really enjoy The Frighteners. He directed another film, didn't he, in 2011? It wasn't 2011, it was something like 2008, 2009 with Saoirse Ronan. I forgot it is off the top of my head. The Lovely Bones, that's what it was. It was a Lovely Bones, and it wasn't the biggest in that film. But I love Peter Jackson as a filmmaker. And this film is part of the reason why. King Kong is part of the reason why I love Peter Jackson so much. So, the plot of the film goes as follows. Carl Denham, played by Jack Black in the film, is a struggling movie executive and hires struggling actor Ann Darrow, played by Naomi Watts in the film, to star in a movie he is going to make on an unknown island. His crew, alongside a writer named Jack Driscoll, played by Adrien Brody in the film, and a movie star, played by Kyle Chandler in the film, heads to this unknown island which comes to be known as Skull Island. where they run into King Kong alongside the natives of the island, beasts that inhabit the island, and creatures that inhabit the island as they face off Kong, as the crew members face off King Kong as they try and get Anne Darrow back, because Anne was kidnapped by King Kong. She was taken away by Kong. But then in the process of facing off against Kong, these crew members and this movie executive played by Jack Black in the film end up bringing Kong back to New York, where they present him as the 8th wonder of the world, which doesn't end well if you know the King Kong story. And honestly, if you hadn't guessed already, I'd be very surprised. But I'm going to say it because I can't wait to see it. I love this film so much. I got a bit too excited there. I love this film to pieces. And for me, this is the perfect monster movie. I love how we get to spend an hour with the characters in this film before we get to see any beasts or creatures, or before we get to Skull Island, and before we see King Kong. I love that about this film. You know, people complain about this movie and say, well, they don't get to King Kong for the first hour. They don't get to Skull Island for the first hour. The first hour is just boring. It's not boring, because what Peter Jackson does so well in that first hour of the film is get you invested into the characters, get you invested into the story, get invested into the character relationships, and then when things start happening, when you get to Skull Island, you're invested in it all. You know, it's all narratively driven. And when you do get those big, epic action sequences, which is so massively done with King Kong, you care about what's going to happen to the characters because of that first hour. And the King Kong sequences, Peter Jackson just delivers on them in the most perfect way. I have never seen any other monster film that has delivered on action set pieces as well as this film does. I mean, don't get me wrong, I enjoyed Godzilla vs. Kong, which came out, was it during the pandemic or just after the pandemic was starting to close down, you know, and lockdowns were starting to ease. You know, I enjoyed Godzilla vs. Kong, but the action in that film was nowhere near as well done as the action in this film. I also really enjoy Kong Skull Island, which came out in 2017. I really enjoy that film. Again, the action in that film, though, is nowhere near as good as the action and the King Kong sequences in this film, because, as already mentioned, they're narratively driven, and you actually get invested in King Kong's story. You get invested in that character because Kong is the star of the film, and you care about Kong. Peter Jackson makes you care about Kong, and Andy Serkis makes you care about King Kong. Yes, not only does Andy Serkis play the chef in this film, and if you don't know who Andy Serkis is, he played, you know, Smeagol and Gollum in the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit films. He played Caesar in the most recent Planet of the Apes films, and he also, most recently, played Alfred in The Batman, which came out last year, you know. Andy Serkis has done a lot of stuff. I mean, not just that, he was also in the Star Wars films, wasn't he? He played Snoke in the Star Wars sequel trilogy. He's done a lot of things. But many people don't know he actually plays King Kong in this film. And apparently, I looked it up on Google, Andy Serkis spent a year studying apes for the film. And you can tell because you totally believe that King Kong is just a giant gorilla. You believe him as this giant ape. But then when you actually find out that it's Andy Serkis behind the scenes doing all the motion capture like he did to bring Smeagol to life, to bring Gollum to life, should I say, because Smeagol's actually his second name, if I got that correct. Yeah, Smeagol's like his secret name. If you've seen Lord of the Rings films, you know what I mean there. But the way he did to bring Gollum to life, the way he did to bring Caesar to life with the Planet of the Apes films, he uses the same motion capture technology. He used it in the Star Wars sequel trilogy too. That's something he brings to the films, and he brings it to this film. He makes you care about Kong in the movement in the way he plays Kong, in his mannerisms, and Peter Jackson also makes you care about Kong because of the relationship that Kong has with Anne. You know, you get invested in Anne's story literally from the get-go in this film. She is the first character we introduce to. In a way, she is the main star of the film. I mean, I know I said Kong is the main star of the film, but in a way, she really is. And you're introduced to her literally from the opening seconds of the film, when you're going to New York, you're introduced to her just like that. And so you made to care about her, because the film is set in the backdrop of all these financial issues that were going on in, the Great Depression. That's what the film is set in the backdrop. It's set in the backdrop of the Great Depression. So when we find Anne in this film, when we first meet her, she is very poor and she is trying to steal food, and we care about her just like that because we see the struggling financial issues that she is facing. And so when things start to happen to her throughout the film, like when she gets the job with Carl, with Jack Black's character, to go to the island to make a movie, something she's always dreamed of, and when she gets to meet Adrian Brody's character, this writer that she's always admired, we feel happy for her. But then when she gets kidnapped by Kong, when she gets taken by Kong, we feel scared for her. But when we start to see her develop this relationship with Kong and develop this romantic connection with him, we absolutely care about that relationship. And Peter Jackson makes you care because of that first hour of the film. People who complain about the first hour of this film, I don't think understand storytelling. If you just I heard someone say this online, if you cut out the first hour of the film and just get into the Skull Island bit, the film's far superior. No, it's not. It's really not. You need that first hour to get into this world, to immerse yourself into the world, to care about the characters. And so when things start happening, like the big monster action set pieces which you want from this film, it's all done so well, it's all directed so well, and narratively and emotionally it's riveting because you care about the characters, as I keep saying. And that's one of the big reasons I love this film so much, because I care about the characters. I care about the main cast, whether it's Carl, played by Jack Black in the film, whether it's Jack Driscoll, played by Adrian Brody, whether it's Ann Dowell, played by Naomi Watts, or whether it's Colin Hanks' character. And all the performances are spot on, and I love the character development as well, which is one thing I haven't mentioned. Like Kyle Chandler's character, he plays this movie star who's got an ego the size of a planet, and he doesn't care about anyone else apart from himself. And then later on in the film, when Carl, Jack, and when our main character being followed about to die through these flies and these creatures that are trying to eat them alive in this canyon, in the dark depths of this canyon, we see the movie star played by Kyle Chandler come in and kill all the creatures and save their lives. It's something he wouldn't have done earlier in the film. And again, it's going to the back of that whole thing, because you follow these characters in the first hour, you see what they're like, and then you see how they develop, and you see how Skull Island takes them down. I mean, the Skull Island sequences are just brilliant. I can understand why some people might complain that some of the monster fight sequences are a bit overdrawn, like King Kong fighting, is it 3 T-Rex he fights? I'm pretty sure it's 3 T-Rex. He definitely fights 2 T-Rexes. And that sequence goes on for quite a bit. You see Kong fighting these 2 or 3 T-Rexes as he's trying to protect, and I'm pretty sure it's 3, I'm going to say it's 3 T-Rexes. I'm pretty sure it is. Yeah, you see him fighting these 3 T-Rexes as he's trying to protect Anna. Of course, that whole sequence is a callback to Kong fighting the T-Rex in the original King Kong film from, like, was it the 1930s? I must admit I haven't seen that film. I probably should, because I'm such a big fan of this film, but yeah, I haven't seen that film myself. But anyway, yeah, you've got that whole sequence where Kong is fighting the 3 T-Rexes, and yes, it's overdrawn, and it is a bit overlong, and all that jazz. But I love it, because what Peter Jackson does so well in the monster sequences is he gives you his money's worth. My dream has always been to see this film in a cinema, because I would pay, I don't know, a good amount of money, let's just say that, a fair, good amount of money to watch in the cinema, because I know I'll get my money's worth from it, even so I've seen the film a gazillion times already. Even when I watch on streaming or when I watch on DVD, I feel like I can get my money's worth, even though I'm not really paying anything to do that. I mean, streaming, obviously, I'm paying things, and, you know, if you did buy the film on DVD, you did probably pay like a $5 or a $10 or whatever to buy the film on DVD. But at the same time, though, I don't care about the price that I paid to watch this film, because Peter Jackson, it's showcased with the Lord of the Rings trilogy and the Hobbit films and his biggest budget movies, and this one is included as well. He doesn't just make a film. he doesn't just make a film. He makes a movie. That's what he does. He makes a movie, and it is on the screen. The budget's on the screen, and he delivers what you want. You know, all those kids growing up with their King Kong toys. I mean, I was very much like this when I was growing up. I had this King Kong toy from this film that I would used to get my dinosaur toys as well, and I would try and make them fight each other. You know, that's something you always wanted to do as a kid if you're a fan of King Kong or monster movies, or something you do with Godzilla. You get your Godzilla toy and you maybe try and get Godzilla to fight some random other toy that you have. And what I think Peter Jackson does is tap into your inner childlike wonder, especially if you're a King Kong fan, and delivers that whole King Kong wonder that you've always wanted to see. You wanted to see King Kong fighting, you know, T-Rexes, 3 T-Rexes at once, alongside all these different creatures on Skull Island, and he delivers that. He delivers that in the best way, in action sequences with Kong on Skull Island, which are so masterfully staged and masterfully directed, and yes, are a bit drawn out, sure. But they work, and they deliver what you paid for. Even though you might not be watching this film on something you have paid for, if you get what I mean, it still feels like you'll get your money's worth. And that's something I admire about the best of Peter Jackson's work. It's also something I admire and love to pieces about the Hobbit trilogy. You know, say what you love about the Hobbit trilogy, love it, hate it, whatever. The money is on the screen in that film, and I've already spoken about this on the channel not too long ago. I love it when a film has a big budget, and you can tell that. You can see the budget on screen. You can see the budget on screen for this film. Don't have a clue what it was. Don't have a clue what the budget was for this film, but it feels... I didn't look this up. I don't know for certain if it is. I might look up actually have to say it. But it feels like the budget for this film was something like $300 million. Now, let's look up what it actually was. What was the budget for the 2005 King Kong film? Let's just look it up. 207 million. So it's actually got quite a big budget. Bigger than I actually thought it would have had. But at the same time, though, you can tell that on screen. The budget is on the screen, and I love it when a film was expensive to make and feels expensive when you're watching it. The budget is on the screen, and it feels like not a single penny was wasted. And that's something, again, I admire about all of Peter Jackson's best work, and that's something I don't just admire about this film, I love about it. Love that about this film. And then, you know, you get the first 2 acts of the film. You get the first act of the film, which is the journey to Skull Island, and you get to meet all the kites in New York. And then the second act of the film is on Skull Island. All the shenanigans that are going on there. Then you get the third act of the film, which is in New York, where Kong goes back to New York, and he's presented as the 8th wonder of the world. And the thing is, after the Skull Island stuff is done, it's so emotionally riveting, and you feel drained. At least I felt drained after all the Skull Island stuff because of how, again, emotionally engaged I was with the film. And the Skull Island stuff ends, and then you think, that's it, the film can't carry on. There's another 45 minutes to an hour left that takes place in New York, which I might argue is the best part of the film. I love to pieces all the stuff in New York. I mean, I love to pieces the first hour of the film on the boat journeying to Skull Island. I love the second hour of the film that takes place on Skull Island. But I particularly love the third hour of the film. When you're in New York and Kong is presented in this theatre and people going, whoa, whoa. Although I must say, on a rewatch, not too long ago when I was rewatching the film again, I was a bit like, the people in that theatre who just saw Kong in front of them, in their own eyes, with their own eyes, just seeing Kong in this theatre in real life, I think they would be reacting in a very different way. Like, I don't think they'll just be going, whoa, whoa, whoa. I think they'll be like, fucking hell. I think that's what they'll be saying. I don't think they'll be saying, whoa. I don't think they'll just be going, whoa, whoa. I think they'll be like, blimey, look at that big thing. Because it's unearthly. It's the 8th wonder of the world. It's something they hadn't seen before. It was just one little nitpick when I was watching the film, and I was thinking, I think they'd react more strongly to that. Anyway, going back onto what I was saying, the whole stuff in the third act, though, when you see Kong roaming about New York and destroying everything and trying to find Anne again, is so entertaining. Because again, it's getting your money's worth. The big budget is on the screen, and you feel for Kong. You're like, yeah, destroyal of New York. And Peter Jackson, again, I mean, I know he only had a budget of $207 million, but it feels like in the whole New York stuff, Jackson was just given the budget he wanted. It felt like, because this was the first one he made after completing the Lord of the Rings trilogy, after winning, going to point out, 11 Academy Awards for Return of the King, the third Lord of the Rings film is arguably one of the best films of all time. It felt like after he did that trilogy, after he did Lord of the Rings, a movie executive came to him and said, Jackson, what budget do you want? And he said, I want this amount of money, I want to make this film. And the movie executive, because Lord of the Rings was such a success, critically, commercially, and all that jazz, the movie executive just went, you know what, Jackson, go and do that. And they gave him the budget he wanted. And you can tell that, again, you can tell that in the Skull Island stuff, but you can tell it even more in the New York stuff. You can tell it arguably more, because I only found this out when I listened to Mark Kermode's review of this film, when he was saying that all the New York stuff that's taken place in 1930s New York, it was apparently filmed in New Zealand, which is where Peter Jackson makes all of these films, so that's not surprising. But I was shocked by that, because I was like, that was done in New Zealand? Wow! Because at the open of the film, you were introduced into 1930s New York, and it looked like 1930s New York. Then you see it again in a more epic scale in the third act of the film. And again, it feels like 1930s New York. It looks like New York from the 1930s, but apparently it was filmed in New Zealand. I was flabbergasted when I heard that. I mean, that's not an over-exaggeration. I was flabbergasted. Like, wow. I mean, Peter Jackson isn't just a filmmaker. He's a filmmaker. You know what I mean? He doesn't just make a movie. He makes a movie. And the fact that he did that in New Zealand is mind-blowing to me. I don't even know how you recreate 1930s New York in a completely different country. But there you go, Jackson is a genius. And yeah, the whole New York stuff. I mean, I know people complain about the scene where Kong is ice skating with Ann Darrow once they meet again and they have that little moment. I know people complain about that. They always said, oh, the ice would have fell through. I understand the complaints. I'm not going to argue with them there. But it doesn't bother me, that sequence. The sequence doesn't bother me because, again, you have so much invested in it. You care about seeing those two characters together and having that last heartwarming moment with one another that I just let it play out. I'm like, yeah, I understand why people have issues with the sequence, with the ice skating sequence. I don't care, though. I don't care because it narratively makes sense. And again, you're already invested in both of those characters. You're invested in Anne and in King Kong, so the sequence works. So then you get on to Kong going up the Empire State Building and all the planes taking him down. You know, just as you thought the film was going to end, you get this whole last 20 minutes, at least it feels like 20 minutes, that, you know, with Kong fighting down the planes, these old 1930s planes, which again look realistic. I don't know how they did the plane stuff in this film. I know Pete Jackson's a big plane person, so perhaps he just, I don't know. Again, it's all down to the budget. So yeah, you get the whole plane sequence where Kong's trying to take down the planes, and you got him protecting, and that whole sequence is just gut-wrenching because we all know what's going to happen to Kong, but we don't want to see it happen because we love Kong in this film. You know, when we first meet him, he is this beast, this scary beast. He's introduced in this very harrowing, I mean, I don't know if harrowing's the right word actually, but he's introduced in this very suspenseful way. But now, at the point in the final moments of the film, in the final moments of the film where he's on the top of the Empire State Building and he's trying to protect Anne, it's so heartbreaking and gut-wrenching, and I never ever felt the same way about another monster movie, or even really another big budget movie like this, since watching this film, if you follow my thinking. I haven't felt that way for a while about a big budget movie where I'm sat there in the final moments and I'm finding it so compelling. I'm finding a movie about a giant gorilla on top of the Empire State Building so compelling and so emotionally riveting. I've never felt like that watching a monster movie or watching any big budget movie like this on this scale for a while. And yeah, that's something the finale of the film just does perfectly. And I know people did complain about the runtime of this film because it is pushing 3 hours. It might just be over 3 hours actually. I don't know what it is, but it is around 3 hours. And Peter Jackson does like making long films. He does. I understand the criticisms there. Yeah. But at the same time, though, I don't care. Because yes, it's 3 hours, but again, it's going back to the whole thing, you get your money's worth. You get your money's worth with this film. Even so you might not watch it in a cinema, it feels like Jackson just wants to deliver on making a proper movie. Not just a film, a proper movie. A proper big budget movie at that. And yes, it feels 3 hours. I will admit, I do feel the 3 hour runtime when I watch it. And there's even an extended version which I've seen, which adds in more creature sequences during the Skull Island stuff and adds in some more character moments here and there, some good character moments involving Jack Black's character and Adrian Brody's character. And I like the extended version. I haven't seen it in a while. And the version I watched recently was the theatrical cut, which I'm reviewing obviously in today's podcast. So I don't remember the extended cut too well, but the point I'm making is there is an extended cut. The film is even longer if you want it to be. Yeah, I love the 3 hour runtime because yes, I can feel it when I'm watching it, and the film is clearly split up into 3 sections: the journey to Skull Island, after the events of Skull Island in New York. It's clearly split up into 3 sections, but that's something I love about it, and I love how Peter Jackson takes time to tell this story. Something I haven't really liked in the current MonsterVerse movies that are coming out with the likes of, Godzilla 2014, Kong Skull Island, Godzilla King of the Monsters, and most recently Godzilla vs. Kong, is how those films feel rushed. They feel like they have to get to the monsters, and they feel like they have to introduce the characters really quickly, get to the bits that people want. Whilst what I love about this film is how Pete Jackson makes you live in this film. He makes you live in this film, and in doing so makes you care about the characters more, and he has these moments where everything just calms down a bit and it breathes. You have these character moments which are particularly happening on the journey to Skull Island, which is one of the reasons I don't think you can cut out the first hour of the film. So yeah, I think that the 3 hour runtime is deserved. I would complain about the 3 hour runtime. If I didn't like the film, I definitely would, and I can understand why some people would be put off by the 3 hour runtime and will complain about it. And there are, as I've already mentioned, some action sequences which are a bit too drawn out, sure. But it is a film that makes you live in its world. And I love that about it. I love how you get to live in Skull Island for what feels like about an hour to an hour and a half of the film. That's something I didn't like about Kong Skull Island. It felt like even so the film took place mostly on Skull Island, we didn't get to live on Skull Island alongside its characters. Yet you feel like you live on the island. You feel like you live on Skull Island alongside the characters in this film. Plus, on top of all that, I love the musical score by James Newton Howard. I think this is James Newton Howard's best musical score. Now, James Newton Howard is someone I've actually complained about as a composer over time. He did the scores for the Fantastic Beasts films. I think he did the scores for some of the later Harry Potter movies as well, though I haven't seen those films for a very long time. He did the score for Jungle Cruise, which came out in 2021, and I hated the score for that film. He did the musical score for the latest Hunger Games prequel, and I didn't really like the film. I thought the musical score was fine, but I didn't think it was used well enough, which is not really his problem, but still, it's point I wanted to make with that film. So I've been critical of James Newton Howard's musical scores over the past couple of years, but his musical score for this film is just perfect. It fits perfectly with this film, and it perfectly encapsulates so many moments. I mean, every time Kong is presented throughout the film as its eighth wonder of the world, as this magnificent beast, the score is roaring, not too dissimilar to King Kong himself. The score is soaring and it's roaring and it's there in the background, and you know, just listen to the score itself outside of the film, which I have done on Spotify a lot recently. You can just tell in the moment in the score when King Kong's there, and you can tell in the moment as well when when you're meant to feel sentimental in the film, when you're meant to, maybe not sentimental actually, but when you're meant to have a bit of a down moment in the film. You can tell that in the musical score when you're meant to have this breathing space, and the musical score is so good because it's exciting when it needs to be, it's magnificent, and it's roaring when it needs to be, and also it's calm when it needs to be, and it's melancholic when it needs to be, and it's all that when it needs to be. It's a score that perfectly fits with the film. And James Newton Howard had a difficult job because Howard Shore did the scores for the Lord of the Rings films before with Peter Jackson. Before Peter Jackson made this film, and Howard Shore did not score this film, and the scores for the Lord of the Rings films are just, again, perfect. I said the word perfect quite a few times in the last couple of minutes of this podcast. So James Newton Howard had a difficult job because he is, in a way, following the footsteps of Howard Shore alongside working with Peter Jackson, if you follow my thinking. And I think he just did a magnificent job, though, with the musical score. I think this is James Newton Howard's best work because it is pulsating and it is melancholic and it is all that, and you really get the feeling of King Kong when you listen to the musical score outside of the film. And that's when I think a musical score really shines, when you not only want to listen to it outside of the movie, but also when it works within the movie and it perfectly encapsulates all the movie in the score alone. That's when I think a musical score is really working at its finest, and I think this is James Newton Howard's finest work. Furthermore, I love the horror sequences in this film too, because Peter Jackson he had his start in his career, in his filmmaking career, with some low-budget horror movies. Yes, before he made The Frighteners, Heavenly Creatures, and the Lord of the Rings trilogy, he made such films as Braindead, Meet the Feebles, and Bad Taste. Now, I must admit, I haven't seen any of those films. I've seen the trailers for those films, and you can clearly see where some of Jackson's work in the likes of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, The Hobbit, and this film, when he taps into the horror aspects in this film, you can see where he's using things he learned and things that he did in his early career, and he's using them again here. I don't know if I made sense myself there, but you get the point I'm making. You can see where he is using his horror roots, where his horror roots are coming back in his later work, and you can see that in the Lord of the Rings trilogy and all the stuff with the Urukai. I've mentioned the Lord of the Rings trilogy quite a lot in this podcast, but I love those films to pieces. And you can see that in this film also. You can see that in King Kong, particularly in two sequences which come to mind right now. The sequence where Andy Serkis's human character dies, where the chef dies, and he's being eaten by these worm-like creatures that are in the water, and it's so gruesome, so you don't want to watch it, but you can't look away through the way it's done, because there's not really a musical score going on in the background from what I remember in that sequence when Andy Serkis's chef is dying, when the chef character is being eaten alive. But it's so harrowing to watch. It really gets under your skin, and that's something I think the best horror directors can do, and it's one of the reasons I really, really like the horror elements of this film, because not only do you have that scene where the chef is dying and being eaten alive by these water worm-like creatures, you also have this scene which I've already briefly spoken about, where our main characters, Jack Black's character, Adrian Brody's character, and I think Jamie Bell's character as well, and Colin Hanks' character, I think Colin Hanks' character is there too. They're in the darkest depths of this canyon, and all these creatures are coming out and are climbing all over the humans, and you're watching it, and it's so, it's just thinking about it gets under your skin. It's not a nice sequence at all to watch, really. It's quite terrifying, especially for a film that's only a PG. I'm pretty sure this film is only a PG, and that's really surprising. That's really surprising because of this sequence, which goes on for like 5 minutes. It's not a short sequence, and basically seeing our main characters being eaten alive. It's terrifying. It's more terrifying than horror films I've seen recently. It's really, really well done, and you can see Peter Jackson's horror roots coming back into use in this film. Moreover, the CGI is brilliant in this film, and it's held up so well. This film is almost 20 years old. It is 18 years old this year. In fact, I think this Christmas it is 18 years old because the film initially released at Christmas, and I'll get onto the Christmas side of it that I've alluded to in the title of this podcast very soon. But going back onto what I was saying, this film is almost 20 years old, and yet the CGI in the film is held up perfectly. It's held up so well. If you told me this film had released a couple of days ago, I would have believed it. I would have believed it because the CGI in this film looks better than so much CGI in films nowadays. It truly does. The CGI on King Kong in this film looks better than the CGI on King Kong in the most recent monster movies. In the most recent, in Kong Skull Island or Godzilla vs. Kong. It looks better than the Kong CGI in that. And it looks better than the CGI for that new Godzilla vs. Kong 2 trailer. God, the CGI in that trailer, I didn't mind the trailer, but the CGI did not look good in that trailer. So, hoping the CGI is better when the film's actually released, but going back onto what I was saying, the CGI in Kong looks so realistic. I know when he's actually picking up Anne in his hands, that is actually, they built a King Kong hand for those moments. So I know that's not CGI, but when you see King Kong doing this, I can't do a King Kong impression to save my life, but I tried to just then. When you see him doing that and beating his chest, it looks real. I'm astounded by that. It still looks real now. I rewatched the film for the first time in a good long while, in late November of this year, and I was watching it going, how the hell did they do the King Kong CGI? It's just fantastic, the CGI in this film. Say all about the film alone, love it, hate it, whatever, but the CGI is just undeniably phenomenal. It's mind-blowing again. It's the genius of Peter Jackson and the filmmakers and his crew that he works alongside, because I'm pretty sure it was the same people who did the CGI for this film who also did the CGI for the Lord of the Rings trilogy, which was also held up very well in terms of visual effects. And yeah, it's just magnificent. Not only the King Kong CGI, but also all the CGI in New York, because again, all that stuff was done in New Zealand, and yet it looks like 1930s New York. All the creature and monster stuff on Skull Island, with the 3 T.Rexes, with the bug-like creatures, that's what I'm trying to say, the bug-like creatures, even that looks real, and the whole film is grounded in verisimilitude, and I think that's another reason the creature stuff all feels and looks real. The film is grounded in verisimilitude, and if you don't know what the word is, look it up. The whole film is grounded in verisimilitude because we have spent time with these characters, because of the way the characters are introduced. Right, so this is a quick little add-on here. One thing I really love about the first hour as well is how gorgeously directed it is. Peter Jackson doesn't just direct the first hour in a lackluster way and then direct the rest of the film in such a masterful way. No, that first hour is gorgeously directed, and it's so well done. It feels like so much care has been put into the first hour of the film, so that's why you care about it so much, because you're so drawn to the visuals by Jackson's directing and how he makes you invest in these characters even though you're going to end up hating them. And I think the whole film feels like that as well. It feels like a film that has just so much passion and care put into it, like so much of Peter Jackson's best work, like his best work. It does feel like a film that's had so much passion put into it, and that's another reason I absolutely love it. Anyway, back to the podcast. And side note here, I love the way Jack Black's character is introduced. You know, he's a struggling movie executive. He's got Colin Hanks as his assistant, and Colin Hanks is brilliant in this film. He is a really underrated actor. I wish I saw him in more, you know. Recently watching The Offer, the series was the drama series all about the making of The Godfather. He's in that, and he's very good in that. But he isn't used enough, in my opinion. And I really wish I got to see him in more after this film, because he is, again, spot on with his performance. I mean, all the performances are spot on, but Colin Hanks is, he's got a small role, but it's important, and it's also very subtle. He does some very subtle things throughout the film that just, that constantly draw you to his character. I think Colin Hanks is a really underrated actor. I think, you know, whenever you mention Colin Hanks, the whole Nepo baby conversation. But I think Colin Hanks stands on his own 2 feet as a great actor when you take his father out the whole equation. You know, when you take his father out of the picture, when you take Tom Hanks out of the picture, Colin Hanks is a very, very good actor by his own. Anyway, I just wanted to mention that. And I love the way, going back into what I was saying, I love the way Jack Black is introduced. He's a struggling movie executive. He's sitting in this theatre room where it looks like they're showing his latest film, and all these other movie executives are looking around the room like, yeah, you can just tell they don't think the film's any good. Then he runs out of the office and he runs onto this boat, and he got the police chasing after him, and it's just, I love the way that character's introduced. I love the way Jim Brody's character's introduced. This writer, Jack Driscoll, and he's trying to get off the boat, and this whole thing, like, if you loved theatre, he's trying to get back into this theatre production which he has written, and Jack Black kind of says to him, if you love theatre, you would have jumped. You would have jumped off the boat to swim back to the theatre. So I love all the character introductions. And what was I saying before? The whole film has gone in verisimilitude, literally from the get-go. That's what I was saying. The whole film feels real from the get-go. And then when you get on Skull Island, it feels real because of all the stuff you've seen for the first half an hour to an hour of the film. The stuff with 1930s New York at the start of the film, and then the journey into Skull Island. And when you get to Skull Island, it feels real, even though a lot of it is just visual effects or is model sets, small miniature model sets, which is something Peter Jackson uses in a lot of his big budget movies. Even so, there's a lot of that. It looks and feels real, and that's a big win for a monster movie. That's a big win for any monster movie, because I've enjoyed some recent monster movies. They have not felt real. They have felt like they've taken place in a completely different world. Yet, this film feels like it takes place in this world. And I love the world building for Skull Island. I love how you got on Skull Island and you spend so much time there. And you feel like you're there with the characters. And the world building is done so well. And there's so many elements I love about the film that I just haven't mentioned yet. But I need to answer the question. I need to answer the definitive question. Is King Kong a Christmas film? Is this film version of King Kong a Christmas film? And my answer is no. Some people, they talk about, is it a Christmas film or is it not? The big debate there is Die Hard. Is Die Hard a Christmas film or isn't it? And the simple answer there is yes, by the way. Die Hard is definitely a Christmas film. But anyway, some people bring up the debate like there is a debate to be had. I don't think there's a debate to be had about this film, about King Kong, about Peter Jackson's King Kong. I don't think there's a debate to be had. The only reason I'm bringing up though whether it is a Christmas film is because when you get back to New York in the third act of the film, and all the stuff with King Kong destroying the streets of New York, I'm pretty sure it's meant to take place at Christmas. If I remember correctly, and I might be incorrect here, because I did see the film a good couple of weeks ago now, it's been a couple of weeks since I saw it, but if I remember correctly, in some of the interior sets, in some of the interior locations that we see in the third act of the film, there are Christmas decorations there. And then outside, in the exterior locations in the third act of the film, there's snow on the ground. And we also, as what he mentioned, we see Anne and Kong ice skating together. It takes place at Christmas. I think the third act of the film does. Yeah, it takes place at Christmas. But though it's not a Christmas film now. A film can take place at Christmas and still not be a Christmas film. I feel kind of similar about this film in terms of whether it's a Christmas film or not, as I do about Wonka, because Wonka also takes place at Christmas, but there's no Christmas messages in either Wonka or King Kong, and there's nothing really about the Christmas of it all in either Wonka or King Kong. Did not expect to compare Wonka and King Kong to each other, but there you go. I just somehow managed to do this podcast today. I don't know how well I did doing that, but I somehow managed to do that in this podcast today. But yeah, I don't think King Kong is a Christmas movie. It's about as much a Christmas movie as, I don't know, Batman Returns. I don't think Batman Returns is a Christmas movie. It just takes place at Christmas. You see, well, in fact, I think it's less of a Christmas movie than Batman Returns. I really think it is, because it's really only the third act of the film that takes place at Christmas, and there's nothing about Christmas in the third act of the film other than some of the set design. And the set design is very good, by the way, but other than that, snow on the ground, Christmas decorations up, if I remember correctly, but it's not Christmas. It's not a Christmas film. And I can say when a Christmas film is not a Christmas film. I think the first two Die Hard films are definitively Christmas films, because the whole message of those films is about family, about coming together, and he's trying to get home for Christmas, and there's Christmas pie happening in the first Die Hard. There's all that Christmas stuff in the first Die Hard film. And the second Die Hard film is also very much a Christmas movie. But I can also tell when a film is not a Christmas film. And King Kong, Peter Jackson's King Kong, although it released at Christmas in 2005, and although it's set at Christmas in its third act, it is not a Christmas movie. This is not a Christmas film. And then you may be asking, why are you wearing a Christmas jumper for this podcast today? I just felt like it. You know, for podcast listeners, I've got a Star Wars Christmas jumper on, and you know why I decided to put it on for this podcast? Because I felt like, I know it's a bit of a misdirect. You know, people who clicked on this podcast thinking I'm about to say that King Kong is a Christmas film because of this, because of that, because of this, because of that. No, it's not a Christmas film. This is not a Christmas film, and anybody who says otherwise doesn't really understand what a Christmas film is. You know? Anyway. King Kong is not a Christmas film. It was actually a bit of clickbait, me putting it in the title of this podcast. Although, I will say that Christmas is a good time of the year to watch this film. It's getting darker outside right now. There's more time in the evening. You're probably with your family a bit more, and you're sitting around the fire. You've got more time to spare, perhaps, because you're not necessarily at work as much because of this time of the year, depending on what job you're doing, obviously. I think that perhaps, though, even though this isn't a Christmas film, it's not a bad film to watch around this time of the year, because it's long, but you can indulge yourself into it because of the time of the year. There's more time in the evening, there's more time when it's dark, and there's more time when you can't really be outside doing things you can do in the daytime outside. So yeah, I think this is actually a good time of the year to watch the film. I mean, as I mentioned, I rewatched this film for the first time in a long time in late November, and it felt like the right time to watch it. It felt like the right time to sit around the fire, and sit around the fire with your Christmas chocolate or with whatever, with your dinner, and get into the film for the 3-hour runtime. It felt like the right time to do it. I can't say the same about watching this film in the summer, you know? I don't think you can watch this film in the summer. I think this is a great time of the year to watch the film. So even though it's not a Christmas film, even though it's not a Christmas film, I would still recommend people watching it around this time of the year, especially if you're not into Christmas films. If you think they're too cheesy, watch King Kong instead. See King Kong face off against Jack Black and Adrian Brody, you know? Watch him fall in love with Ann Darrow. Watch King Kong terrorize the streets of 1930s New York and climb up the Empire State Building and take down those planes in the most magnificent way possible. through the direction of Peter Jackson. And that is, that's not a bad Christmas movie in my opinion. Again, it's not a Christmas film, but it's not, I think it's the right time of the year to watch this film, no? Yeah, I think it's the right time of the year to watch this film. If you haven't seen it yet, of course. If you have seen the film and it's not for you, then that's completely fair. You know, I can understand why some people... You know what? No, I can't. I was about to say I can understand why some people wouldn't like this film. I can't understand that. No, I can't today. I really can't understand why people would dislike this film. I just think it is perfect. I think it's a perfect monster movie because of the reasons I've already said. You care about the characters. The first hour lets you care about the characters. Then when you get to Skull Island, it delivers. And the monster action is on the screen and it's what you want it to be. It's a big budget film and it feels like that and it looks like a big budget film. The characterizations are done very well. The character, you find out a lot about these characters and you are meant to care about them, but also at times you're meant to hate them because of what they're doing to Kong, and I love how that is done, and I love how the character development is so dark and so brilliant as well. And then the musical score is just perfect. The performances are all on point. Peter Jackson's directing is just... yeah, it's so well done because it makes Kong look like this huge, magnificent, dominant beast, which is something I can't say for other monster movies. And then you get into the whole New York stuff at the end, and it's just the cherry on the ice on top of the cake, because even that's done all perfectly. And it's just... it's the perfect monster movie in my opinion. I love it to pieces. It's one of my favourite films of all time. Probably my top 20 favourite films of all time. I can't say it's in my top 10. But it would definitely be my top 20. It's just brilliant. I mean, it's better than brilliant. It's perfect. And so, all in all, without question, I would definitely give Peter Jackson's King Kong a 10 out of 10. I really don't have any criticism with this film. I think it's the perfect monster movie, as I keep saying, but I really think it is because you care about the characters, which is something you can't say about many other monster movies. I know Godzilla Minus One is coming out, or will be out on the day that I release this podcast. I know that Godzilla Minus One is meant to be very good, but I haven't seen that film yet. I actually did this podcast today before Godzilla Minus One to see Godzilla Minus One, which everybody's been raving about as just one of the best monster movies, if not the best monster movie of all time. You know, I actually did this podcast today to see how well, to see if Godzilla Minus One actually exceeds this film in becoming my new favourite monster movie of all time. I don't know if it will, because I've got such a personal connection to this film, though, because I remember watching it so much as a kid, and remember watching it on long drives to Scotland in the back of the car on this TV monitor my dad used to hook up to the back of the seat, and I remember watching it so many times on there. I remember just sticking clips of the film on YouTube whenever I was bored when I was much younger, and yeah, I just have so many fond memories of watching this film, and it holds such a special place in my heart. So I don't know if Godzilla Minus One will exceed it that way, but it still might be a better movie. But as of now, before seeing Godzilla Minus One, this is the best monster movie of all time in my opinion. I love so many aspects of the film. So many aspects I haven't even mentioned yet, you know? I'm not going to mention because it's been going on long enough. Let's see how long I've been going on for. Over 50 minutes. Of course I've been going on for over 50 minutes. So I'm going to start to round things off by saying this. This is the best monster movie of all time, in my opinion. It is the perfect monster movie. It's one of my favourite films of all time. And I think it's some of Peter Jackson's finest work. I don't think it's his best work. I think his best work is still the Lord of the Rings trilogy, which is complete perfection from start to finish. Although I might like it more than the Hobbit films. And I love the Hobbit films, but I might like it more than that. And I don't care about the length of the film. In fact, give me the extended edition any day and I'll watch the hell out of that as well. I love the character introductions. I love the characters themselves. I love how you end up hating them by the end of the film. I love how much you care about Kong. throughout the film, and I think Andy Serkis does a great job doing the motion capture performances as King Kong. He doesn't do the motion capture performances in the action sequences, but he does it in all the sequences with him, with Kong and Anne, and you feel that, you'll learn to care. You care about Kong as the film goes on. The action sequences are so well done and deliver what you want them to. The budget's on the screen in the best way possible. It's an expensive film, and it feels like that. And then I love how you get to live in Skyline. I love the breathing space of the film. I love all the horror elements of this film. I love the emotional moments. I love how emotionally riveting the film is. And I love the relationship between Anne and Kong in the film, which is one thing I really mentioned. And then you get to the third act, and it's just like the cherry on the ice on top of the cake when all this stuff happens in New York with Kong up Manhattan, and it's not up Manhattan, sorry, when it's up the Empire State Building, and it's just perfect. I could go on and on about it, and I have already, but you get the point. I love this film to pieces. I love this film so much. It's not a Christmas movie. But it's also a good time of the year to watch it, though. This is a good time. I would say the best time of the year to watch this film if you're not into Christmas movies. So yeah, I love this film so much. I think it's a perfect monster movie. I return to it every single year, and I return to it as much. I think it's a perfect monster movie, and yeah, I can't get over how much I adore it. The more I think about it, the more I talk about it, I love it even more. And you get the point. I think it's amazing. I think it's utterly magnificent. And so, all in all, as I've already said, I'm going to say once more, this is a perfect monster movie of all time. And I'm going to say once more again, too, that this is easily, like King Kong, like Peter Jackson's King Kong, is easily a 10 out of 10 from me. Anyway, guys, that is it for today's podcast. Yes, we finally got to the end in this podcast. Went on a bit longer than I was expecting to, but we finally got to the end there. So thank you, as always, for watching or listening to this podcast, if you have managed to by this point. So thank you all for watching or listening to the podcast, and please let me know your thoughts on this film in the comments section below. Maybe you don't like this film, and I did say on this podcast that I don't understand people disliking it. In reality, I was just being a bit funny there. No, I do understand people might dislike this film, and all film is subjective, so if you don't like this film, that is completely understandable, and please let me know why in the comment section below, or maybe you feel similar to me, and maybe you absolutely adore it. Maybe you absolutely adore Peter Jackson's King Kong. Whatever your thoughts are on this film, please let me know in the comment section below, and if you haven't yet, please click down below and like and subscribe on this podcast. I look forward to many more podcasts coming very soon on this channel. As I said, thanks for watching or listening to this podcast, and I suppose this is it. Yes, we finally got to the end, so I will see you guys again soon, but bye for now. Bye.